Got it.
Great.
Is there a, I could run Wi-Fi from my hotspot or
You can use the CEDC and I think it's a CEDC guest.
there's a guest
Yeah, you can use that one.
saying network security key.
Capital C,
Yeah.
capital E, capital D, capital C, capital R, OCKS, no caps.
Now, Lisa, do we have audio?
Okay.
Can you see if we do?
Still no.
Can you hear me, Lisa?
Recording in progress.
Okay. Ted, would you say a couple of words?
Test. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I hear you fine.
Test.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just see if I can present. Share.
Hi, how are you, Heather?
Good, how are you?
Good. Hey, look at that.
Ooh. Not bad, huh?
Not bad, Lisa. Oh, we never have stressful days here.
I only have 2 people that work for me, and generally, and I haven't had one of them for the last few months.
I'm
So
sorry.
you can imagine. Matt,
Martha.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
he
You
left
too.
to pick up that phone.
And Mike will be joining us, but not until 1:15. And he'll do it on Zoom.
Treasurer for the Hudson City School District. But yeah. Talking about needing a vacation.
I'm sorry, my Mac's going to have,
Good afternoon.
How's it going?
but I don't have any temperatures. I wasn't out the
No, it
country.
is. I was gonna.
Recording in progress.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hey, Mike.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Recording in progress.
Oh, yeah. Is the meeting on mute, Mike? I'm not hearing anything.
I don't think it's started yet.
All right, thank you.
When you're ready to start, Martha, you'll need to take us off mute.
Don't you have to have the recording?
Lisa. Is Lisa coming? Is Lisa joining us?
I think she has to be at her computer.
Well, here's our attorney. We'll wait until she comes sit with us.
Okay. Everything running except for, Mike reminded you, I could hear it, to take. him
We're gonna
off
have
mute.
to ask you to speak up, please.
We didn't start yet. Our attorney is just getting here, so we'll be starting
Okay,
in a
thank
couple of
you,
minutes.
Madam Chair.
All right. Have some patience with us. We'll be all right.
Lisa, that date works for
Does
me.
it?
Thank you.
Let me know when you're ready, and that is when we'll start.
Please stop right. I'm all set. Thank you so much.
No problem. No problem. Okay, can you all hear me? It is now 1:03 PM on December 8th, and we will now begin our Hudson IDA meeting. We have before us the minutes for November 3rd of 2021. And if there aren't any questions about the minutes or any add-ons or takeaways, may I please have a motion and a second to accept the minutes?
I'll make that motion. Or I guess I had to wait for a minute. What? In case there were any changes. No, they're good.
May I have a second to that motion, please?
A second.
So we have Rebecca Wolf and Heather Campbell, Lisa. Now, second on the agenda, we are, oh, I'm sorry, I should have took attendance. So let's backtrack to that. Which members on the board is online?
Mayor Johnson's on there.
I'm here.
Okay. John Cody? Richard Wallace?
Here.
Thank you. And we have Heather and we have our attorney and Rebecca Wolf. So we just have Mr. Cody right here. Okay, all right.
And Cheryl.
Oh, sorry, and the assessor Cheryl isn't here either. Thank you. So moving on to number 2 on the agenda is Living Community Consultants.
Hi, board members. Is it all right if I stand here? Is that?
You can have a seat.
I'm Ted DeBarbieri. We've been talking to the board since think the summer around a particular piece of research. The initial draft of that research is in your packets. I have additional copies if folks in the room would like them. Our purpose today is I think twofold: to get feedback on the initial draft and also to present what we found. If you look underneath in your packet on the left, you'll see the materials. It just it starts memo. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I'm
Walk
gonna
us through it, please.
yeah, sure. Thanks, Chair. I'm gonna share my screen just so that people on Zoom can see as well. Great.
Good.
Great. This sort of focus is on how the board can use social and economic justice tools in scoring pilot and other exemption applications. So that's really the focus of what we looked at. The scope was twofold, at least in our minds, and I think in what we were what was set forth in the contract that set up this piece of research. First, to see what other IDAs in the area are doing that are representative in terms of population, and sort of innovativeness or progressiveness, or sort of what they're doing with respect to social and economic justice scoring metrics. So we wanted to look around the area. We also wanted to look more broadly and see what trends there are across the country that the board might want to consider in terms of how it reviews pilot applications and other applications for exemption. So that's what we did. We scaled back the scope slightly to those primary scopes that serve sort of research points, and that's what we came up with in negotiation and consultation with the board. The findings are presented here, focused around 4 particular areas. The first area is what we call sort of the hyper-local. We looked at 13 IDAs in the region to see which ones, if any, use community benefits metrics, in community benefits in particular, social and economic justice metrics in general. So we'll tell you what we found. In addition, we found 2 useful tools that we wanted to at least make you aware of to see if you might want to consider implementing them or adopting policies. Those are racial equity impact assessment, and then the equitable development scorecards. There was an additional example that didn't fit sort of those 2 particular tools. So moving on to the hyperlocal or regional research that we did, there were 2 particular IDAs that we wanted to highlight for you. The first is the City of Albany Industrial Development Authority, and then the second is Ulster County, our friends across the river. And I don't have it in the presentation here, but in the memo on page 9, we pulled out so just so you can see what the particular metrics are for City of Albany, and the next page is for Ulster. Just want to highlight kind of those 2 examples. For City of Albany, applicants must include, they must tick at least 10 of these boxes. And the boxes are revitalization, investment, and employment. And then there's particular criteria for each.
You mean a 10 total out of the 3 selections?
Correct, that's right. There's additional baseline requirements that have to do with like general comprehensive plan, like Albany 2030, which is just the comprehensive plan in that city. Some conversations I had with board members there were very positive. Adopting this type of approach gave developers certainty about what they needed to include in order to be approved, which I think from our conversations was sort of one goal of the board. You want to have developers knowing what you, stakeholders, residents think are important when they're claiming exemption. So just in some of our interviews and conversations, that was something that came up. There's a the regularity of the approach has changed the way that developers approach the board. They include these items directly. And I thought that was interesting, and you might want to know.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah,
I mean,
please.
I would be
Wait.
curious.
Let me
Oh,
recognize you.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
The question is, I would be interested to know whether the desired effect and what could be that it would actually attract developers who are already committed to these kinds of goals, like whether it goes beyond just letting developers know that they must, tick some boxes, but actually could work to, what I'm saying, like that the news could get out,
Right.
in a sense of what kind of developers we're looking for.
Yeah, I don't, we didn't look specifically to see whether that was a desired outcome or that outcome resulted from adopting these principles, but I think it's something that I can explore further and either add to in the final report that we update, or something that to the extent that we find additional info, I'm happy to include it, but it wasn't something that we noticed in our
Yeah.
research initially.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point.
Thank you, Rebecca.
On the next page, on page 10, the approach in Ulster County. So the approach here is a points one. The tax exemption amount is determined by how many points are allocated or how many points are achieved. So the greater the points, the greater the exemption. So slightly different approach. The focus here is jobs and wages, environmental sustainability, community investment, and educational or workforce investment. So kind of similar, but slightly different approach. One thing I just wanted to mention, share with the board in my conversations with some other board members on the boards at some of these two examples. They mentioned a connection. I was asking, like, well, why are both these IDAs using this type of approach? Sounds like they're getting advice from bond counsel and don't have specific more. So that's something that I'm following up on. So not from the board's counsel, but from an outside group. There's just perhaps that's something that we can, if you'd like, I'm happy to look into more.
They share the same council.
Share the same counsel. Yes.
That's one answer.
Yes. I thought that was interesting. The remainder of the tools that we looked at, the racial equity impact assessments, adopted in two instances that we looked at. So Baltimore Development Authority, in their Empire Zone tax credit tool, there's three broad categories. They look at impact goals, community engagement, and evaluation. Specifically in terms of how development impacts.
And how successful are they with these different categories?
Yeah, in terms of achieving desired outcomes.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's a great question. And I mean, I think you want to make sure if you're putting in particular inputs that you're going to get what you expect.
Yeah,
Right.
and if they're having good outcomes, we would like to know it and just not,
I think that's like the next level of inquiry into this, is like what actually is working. Yeah.
So far, what we did in this initial study is sort of what's out there. We highlighted what we thought would be most fruitful to look at further. What I'm going to highlight, what I'm sort of where I want to get is, what next steps, if any, does the board want to take? And yeah, happy to sort of flesh out, what would be most, what we think would be most fruitful, and then obviously the board can decide how to act on it. Yeah, in terms of specific outcomes, we've highlighted in our findings table, sort of the approach that they took. I don't have anything detailed on sort of what they've been experiencing, but I'm happy to talk more about what that might look like.
Would you be willing to come back next month to do the same presentation?
Sure.
Because some of us won't be here next year.
Yeah, right. No, of course. Yeah, I'm open to sort of, continuing to explore what, whatever the board would find useful.
Thank you.
There was an additional use of racial equity impact assessments in the Chicago Department of Housing. In that case, some focus on offering preferences for projects that were giving additional resources to tenants and also those that prioritize marginalized residents. We found an equitable development scorecard approach that was being used in Chicago, similar to a racial equity impact assessment, but slightly different, able to include impacts based on gender, sexual orientation, and other sort of markers of traditionally marginalized groups. There was a final example that we looked at in Michigan. The Economic Development Corporation required that applicants articulate particular community benefits in order to receive funding in that instance. As far as next steps, I'm interested in any particular feedback that board members might have now. In terms of implementation, that was beyond the scope of this initial engagement, but we're, to the extent that it'd be helpful to have summarized further what we found for the board to use. That could include writing language or policy language to include in the review process. We also talked potentially about board composition and whether that's something you would like additional feedback or research on.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from any board members who are on Zoom?
No, none for me.
Mr. Wallace?
No, not for me. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the public? I see you. Okay, Rebecca?
Can you just say what kinds of things we might need to do in order to figure out what Hudson can use best of these? I mean, what would be the process of kind of narrowing it down, deciding what pieces to take for our actual process?
What we talk about in the memo is, it could look like stakeholder engagement meetings, some level of public meeting or public meetings to talk about what priorities are most important to residents. Obviously, the board choosing or sort of stepping up to either facilitate or guide that process, I think would be important, and that's perhaps for the next board to decide what their priorities are. But I think some level of public engagement was something that we envisioned, and then I think coming up with something similar to what your peer IDAs are using, while also I think has been beyond the scope of our research, but ensuring that what is adopted is consistent with the applicable laws and is appropriate. That's sort of outside the scope of what we discussed.
Mm-hmm.
No idea what this guy's saying.
Suzanne has a question. Suzanne?
Hi, thank you. This is really interesting to learn about, and I wanted to know what kind of timeline adopting something like this could take, like best and worst case scenario. How soon could a city adopt something like this, or could Hudson?
Well, from my understanding, the board will discuss the examples that were given and choose what's best, and then we would create a resolution, from my understanding. But that's if this board would like to move forward with it or leave it into the hands of the upcoming board. But initially, that would be it. We would discuss the examples, break it down to see which best benefits the city of Hudson, and adopt it in that respect by having a resolution passed. by the IDA board. Heather?
Can you give me an idea of some of the stakeholders that you would envision the IDA engaging with?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think representative of the groups that are representative of the those who might benefit from some of the different community benefits offered, with respect to jobs and employment, people who might be hired in new development projects, either on construction or in permanent positions. Certainly low-income residents who might benefit from potential housing opportunities in terms of reinvestment. I think folks from the development community too, whether it's existing developers or others like Rebecca suggested, maybe best practice. I don't know, development potential new developers who might be attracted by an approach like that. Those are sort of a couple examples.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions from the public or board members on Zoom? All right, any other
No
questions?
questions from me.
Any other questions from the board? All right,
Thanks for the time.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Madam Chair, could I just suggest that in the final report, the notes identify the specific sources for the examples, for example, West Side Community Organization, that's a Chicago organization or whatever, so that,
Yeah, we know the referencing.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we have on the agenda is Project PBF Hudson. And
Thank you.
what? Did somebody say something?
Mike said thank you.
It's Mike Tucker.
Before we begin, as chair of the board, we did have a public hearing. I know everyone wasn't able to make it, and there were some concerns around that. And I did have some conversations with some board members. I would first ask if there's anything that the representatives for the pocketbook factory have anything they would like to say.
Hi, this is Sean Rowland. I actually don't think so. I mean, I think we gave a pretty good summary at the public hearing, and I was very grateful to receive questions and feedback from community members. We prepared, and in particular, the letter that we received from Hudson Community Benefits Alliance. We prepared a written response, which we shared back with the constituents who presented that. And then I also shared that with the board via Mike Tucker, who I think circulated it. So yeah, there's kind of detailed answers to each of the questions or asks that were presented, and happy to go into more depth if the board would like.
Okay, so I'm gonna continue that. With that being said, is there any other comments from the board? All right, so like I stated earlier, I know we had a public hearing, but not everyone was able to attend, and there's still concerns around communication and members of the community. And if we can put something on the schedule, I would like to make a motion or have a motion to table this vote so that these communications can be clarified and everybody can be on the same page and moving forward with a special meeting to vote on this particular matter. With that-
Madam Chair,
Who's speaking?
this is Mike Tucker.
Yes?
I think it would be helpful. I think for the agency and the public, if council could identify discuss this as it relates to our approval process. There was no intent to vote on anything today. And as you know, I have a meeting scheduled with representatives of the Alliance and the developer on Friday.
Is that you?
I do think these items need to be discussed, but many are outside of our jurisdiction, particularly in light of the action of the planning board and the fact that our criteria for reviewing projects does not at this point include some of these items. So council perhaps could address these for the board to give us some guidance as to where we have jurisdiction and engagement and where we don't.
So are you disrupting my motion? Is that a question for the attorney, or do we continue with our motion?
Well, there was no intent to take a vote today, so I'm not sure if a motion not to table the matter is, perhaps she could address that as well.
So what will take place after your meeting on Friday?
We would report back. The intent of the meeting on Friday was to begin a dialogue with the developer and the community group to identify what, in some cases, what they are looking for and find other alternatives, because the IDA is not in a position to require the developer to do some of the things that they have requested.
And I understand that. All right, so we'll withdraw from the motion that was made, and we'll go by the meeting on Friday. So if that's the case, then what were we going to discuss since they are on the agenda?
Well, I think
Can I just ask a question. Can you just
Wait, 1 second, Claire.
So, Madam Chair, I think it would be appropriate for the board to discuss the public hearing comments that you received and begin to go through the findings review that you do in connection with the financial application. So we have in our criteria, right, we have these criteria set out, and we should begin to go through those criteria, even if you're not thinking about making a resolution today. It would be well to start thinking through those criteria, because you'll be thinking of in terms of, if you're going to do a resolution next time or considering it, then, you know, we can lay out the findings that you're thinking about in that regard, right? So we should go through the criteria today, so that we are thinking about all those criteria in light of, you know, your findings about the project and the public hearing comments that you received and so forth. You know, the other issues, you know, you'll have the benefit, I guess, of whatever conversations Mike has at the next meeting, and you can take that into account as well. But your public hearing is your public hearing. And I think it would be well to review those criteria in light of the public hearing comments that you did receive.
Okay,
That
yes, thank you. Do we have those before us?
I don't know that you have a copy of it. They're on your website, but
No, it's right here.
you have a copy of it.
It says record of public
Oh,
hearing.
the public hearing, yes, you have the public hearing.
Not the
Oh, you
criteria.
meant the criteria.
Yeah, the criteria are on your website, which maybe Mike could pull up. And Madam Chair, you did note that some of the members were at the meeting, but what I would say is you would, before you vote on a matter, you would then want to ask those members if they all were able to go back and review the record of the public hearing prior to being able to vote. That would be what you.
So I'll be reaching out to Mr. Cody and the assessor.
Well,
They're the only
no, I
ones that
think
were
the
not
mayor
here.
wasn't at the public hearing, right?
Oh, I'm
Right,
sorry, I
the mayor
thought you
wasn't at
meant
the public
today's
hearing, right, so I'm
attendance.
talking about at the public hearing, so he would want to have, Mayor, you will want to have reviewed the public hearing record before you vote.
So Mayor Johnson, I'm not sure if you heard, but our IDA attorney is suggesting and advising that if you haven't read through the comments of the public hearing, to please do so before we're taking any matters into consideration towards a vote or resolution and so forth. And any other members? that
Yeah,
have-
I've already read through the comments and I read through the letter by the group.
Thank you. And if any other members that did not attend the public hearing, please do the same. All right.
Madam Chair, I hope you can see on the screen the criteria for evaluation that's within the IDA scope.
Can you zoom it in a little bit?
I think, Mike, if you can zoom into section 3, that's probably the substance of what you want to look at.
Section 3, here we go.
Criteria.
There you go. So Mike, do you want to lead, Madam Chair, with your permission, do you want to have Mike lead you through that discussion of each of these criteria?
Sure, why not?
Sure. The
I can see.
So the first one is the
Have to,
project will create or retain jobs, Mike.
Where do you see that?
Number 3.
Right.
and
under 3 uniform criteria. Gonna have to reduce the size of this just a bit. Be able to see it myself. The number 1, the following uniform criteria will
apply to all categories eligible for projects and will be considered with and in addition to all material information included in conjunction with the application for financial assistance. You could take it over, Mike.
Unfortunately, I can't see where I'm not able to get off my screen. Well, hold on, I can do this. Wait a second.
We can read it. So the first one is the extent to which a project will create or retain jobs.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, just a minor point of order. It's very difficult to hear anyone in that room.
I'm sorry.
Tiffany, you got a great set of pipes, but Tiffany and
Let me see if
Rebecca,
I
you're the
can-
only two who are on camera as well. If someone else is speaking, if they can identify themselves. I know it's difficult for you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Let's not go.
Okay, I think I have it now. Extent to which a project will create or retain jobs. 2, estimated value of tax exemptions. 3, amount of private sector investment. 4, likelihood of project being accomplished in a timely fashion. 5, extent of new revenue provided to local taxing jurisdictions. 6, any additional public benefits. 7, extent to which a project will provide local labor construction jobs. Such criteria and information will be used by the agency to create a written cost-benefit analysis of the project. The following additional criteria may apply to warehousing and research projects, but I won't go through those because this is not that type of a project. Following criteria may apply to commercial projects. Regional wealth creation, percentage of sales / customers outside the city, located in a highly distressed census tract, alignment with local planning and development efforts, promoting walkable community areas, elimination and reduction of blight, proximity support of regional tourism attraction facilities, city official support, building or site has historic designation, and 9, provides brownfield remediation.
Let's discuss it.
As you know, Madam Chair, the agency relies on the planning board with respect to addressing a determination under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And I believe we have reviewed the issues that were raised by the Alliance against these criteria. And there are certain requests that they have raised relating to local jobs that clearly fall within the parameters of the agency's uniform evaluation criteria. Certainly, the developer
Mike,
has.
if I can interrupt, Mike, do any of the Alliance members know about the meeting Friday? Because this is the first
No.
time.
No,
I've heard about
the
it.
Alliance members present have never heard about the Friday meeting, and I specifically requested a week's notice. We're full-time workers, and some of us are single parents. And I'm not sure, Mike, where you scheduled it or who you scheduled it with, but no one on the Alliance.
I scheduled it with Claire, who said that you wanted a week's notice, and so we
Yeah, we were in
discussed
the
it.
process, but we didn't lock in a date or a time, but we're open to it.
I have an email from you that Friday at 9 o'clock at my office.
Okay, well, if
We
you
did-
could forward that again, because I don't have that, so.
Okay, I just wanted to state that we are very interested. This just was news. We did not know anything about this
Right.
time being confirmed.
Morning meeting and.
Right, but I guess I just want to make it clear that I was only following the email, and I can put that on the screen as well. It's not that I
Okay,
was not
so
trying
we
to.
got an
I was not in
understanding
any way.
there's a miscommunication with the emails. Maybe
We
we
wa-
can have a part 2 and part
Mhm.
1 meeting. Sean said he's here, he's available, so maybe.
Yeah,
you
we would
can
like to
split-
meet.
Excuse me, maybe you can split your group and some members can meet at 9. And the other members who are working that can meet later on in the late afternoon or early evening, maybe you can work on that. But Sean said he is open to that.
Great. We'll check how many people can come at 9. We just didn't know about that time. Thank you.
And then you all can work on the time for the later afternoon that day.
We're
The
happy to
members
find
that can't
times
make
that
it
work
in
for
the
you.
morning.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Great. Now what?
We're talking about jobs, not you.
Sorry.
So maybe make a
Yes.
suggestion. It seems like we should go through each of the criteria under the uniform policy and at least have a brief discussion about whether or not it generally fits or does not fit.
I agree. Mike is the reader.
Okay.
Mike, did you hear that suggestion?
Yes, I'm bringing it back to where I can read it.
Okay.
Number 1, the extent to which a project will create or retain jobs. This project, as I understand it, in their application, I believe, Sean, is it 55 jobs?
That is close to it. I'm leafing through the application here, but
So I believe that in the report, Madam Chair, I believe that the report identified a total number of jobs that would be created by the project, but the applicant also identified the number of jobs that they would be responsible for creating. So I think you should recognize both of those elements, that there are jobs that may be created by the retail facilities and other things that are not necessarily the employees of the applicant, and there are jobs that the applicant was identifying that they would be specifically responsible for. So I
So
think the
let's
55 was
start-
that number.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that and pointing that out. It is important. Could you start with the jobs that you will be responsible for? That will be, if I'm understanding, people hiring from the city and so forth. Can you
absolutely.
speak on that? And then when you finish, we'll go into what you're not responsible for.
Okay.
Thank you.
So specifically for the city of Hudson, this is on page 4 of the economic and physical impact report. The direct job creation is 42. So those would be the jobs that we are committing to and responsible for.
And those 42 would pertain to,
City of Hudson jobs created. And
Jobs
then,
in the city of Hudson.
yeah, within the city of Hudson, the creation of those jobs.
and hiring people within the city of Hudson as well?
That is, I have to, and if Victoria Stores is on the line, she's the analyst who prepared this. You might know better where this is than me off the top of your head, Victoria, if you're able to speak to that.
Victoria, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I was on mute. Thank you. Could you refresh specifically what the question is, and I absolutely will provide an answer.
My understanding of the question was of City of Hudson jobs.
How many jobs is Sean would be responsible for that pertains to the city of Hudson? And outside of the employment that will be received outside of his control, we would like to know those specific numbers, please.
Yes, I will pull, these numbers are in the full report, which I have in front of me.
And Claire, I didn't forget you. I know you have a question.
Before
These
answering.
reports are also online.
Yes, as important to note, the online version of the report is from October. A revised report dated November 11th, 2021 was
That's been posted. That's been posted.
Terrific. So I do want to start out by differentiating between jobs that Pocketbook Factory will commit to under clawback arrangements versus jobs that are expected to be created. What I can provide you is not the contents of the clawback agreement. That would be between the IDA and Pocketbook, and council would opine on that. But looking at the economic impact report, we do have differentiated jobs anticipated for the project overall within Columbia County and jobs anticipated within the city of Hudson. And I can speak to which ones would be direct on-site jobs at the Pocketbook Factory. So starting with the construction jobs.
Victoria, before you begin, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Rebecca Wolf has a question.
It's just, can you also speak to how many of those jobs are dedicated to residents of Hudson, like to hiring locally in the city?
She's gonna do the two.
Well, no, she's talking about jobs that are created.
I believe Sean will able to answer that question, Rebecca.
Okay. Fine.
Continue, Rebecca, Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. Construction jobs, direct on-site construction jobs for within the county as a whole are estimated to be 65 direct on-site construction jobs. Of those jobs, it is expected, based on the availability of the skilled labor, that 7 of those jobs would be filled by City of Hudson residents. Within the actual annual operations of the facility, and that includes the direct staff managing, staff at the hotel, that would be 65 direct jobs. That's on-site operations and hotel, and then additional indirect and induced from follow-on economic activity. In addition to that, project tenants, based on the anticipated uses and the size of the space available, are anticipated to provide another 41 jobs. This is within the county. So 65 on site between the building and the hotel, and 41 additional tenants. Of those jobs within the city of Hudson, it is anticipated that Hudson residents would fill both of the on-site operation jobs anticipated and 32 of the hotel jobs. So that would be 34 jobs, on-site operations and hotel, that are anticipated to be filled by City of Hudson residents. Among the project tenants, it is anticipated that 8 jobs would be filled by City of Hudson residents. So within the City of Hudson, between the on-site operations, the hotel, and project tenants, it is anticipated that 42 jobs would be filled by City of Hudson residents. as a final number when taking into consideration the 42 jobs on site, plus additional jobs created in the community as workers spend their wages and engage in economic activity, it is anticipated that 51 jobs would be filled by residents of the city of Hudson.
Is that 51 and 42 together?
No,
Mm.
no, that's 51 total.
Okay. That answer your question?
So it's a little
Madam
dizzying, but
Madam Chair, if I
Yes.
can reply to Rebecca's specific question that also I think Mike referenced and Victoria referenced. So those are the projections in terms of like what the IDAs ask for, what we'll commit to for the clawback period, or to ensure that we're keeping up our end of the deal. And that's something that I think we work out with the board and council on both sides in terms of what that metric is. And I think looking back at, I took a moment to look back at the other successful hotel application with 620 Hudson, just to get a sense of what that looked like in their final resolution. And it was around 50% of the jobs that they anticipated creating in the city of Hudson would be filled by City of Hudson residents. And so that, you know, mirrors pretty closely what Victoria's findings are in terms of the anticipated in here for residents. Six is, you know, like
40-ish.
yeah.
I mean,
So I think we're within the same parameters as an application that was successful, and we're also comfortable with that based on the analysis that Victoria produced.
I mean, I guess I would just like to suggest that you could do better than that other hotel. You know, given the robust description in your proposal about how you plan to do workforce development training programs within the city and like really engage with all the organizations and be actually like on the ground working with putting people in jobs, it seems to me like you should be able to do better than the other hotel. I mean, the other hotel is a, you know, a major like corporate developer coming from Nowheresville, and has little to none of actual interest in the city, you know? And so given that that's your whole platform about this development, is that you're bringing like a really different attitude, it seems like.
I would love, and I think we will do better. However, for the sake of, you know, creating a successful agreement with the IDA, I think one, there are, you know, multiple concerns around within specifically the hospitality industry around availability and even like the reality of hiring people. So that to me at this moment sounds quite scary to commit to something that is more restrictive, especially actually because in everything we've laid out, we actually are committed to doing this work, but to hold us to a you know, a bar that we might not be able to reach in a punitive way seems almost counterintuitive. Like we're going to be engaging in doing the work that we've laid forth and have been very consistent about. And to me, it seems like if we can do better, we absolutely will do better than that. But it's you know, projecting 3 years into the future into a very uncertain labor market and economy. So that feels yeah, a little bit hard to respond to.
Yeah, well.
Anyone else have any comments, questions?
I would just make a similar observation to what he's saying, which is, you know, these, one way of looking at these are the bare minimums that are going to happen, because anything less than this is going to trigger a clawback. So, you know, I do think there's some prudence given the fact that this is a pretty significant development, the type of which has not yet happened in the city of Hudson, at least not in the last decade or so. I think it's reasonable to be, you know, I don't think these are unaggressive numbers. I think those are pretty significant local job numbers. And as he says, there's nothing that says that once they hit 42, they're gonna stop and start importing people from Albany. Hopefully, they're gonna continue, and that number is gonna be higher, especially as they get more training in place, so.
And I agree with both of what they both suggested, and especially Heather, her experience as a treasurer and so forth. So maybe along the lines, we can just state that, with the number you suggested, and if things go the way or that you look for it to be and greater than, and you would hire more than what is projected.
Absolutely, and I think that would be a win for Hudson and a win for us to have our employees as part of the city of Hudson, and as like for all the practical reasons, it's really great when your employees live very close and work within the community.
And we're given an opportunity to roll levels up in their employment with your.
Absolutely, yeah. In terms of basically ongoing training and ability to advance within the organization. That's also best practice in the hospitality industry to constantly create and develop your workforce that's already on board. And so it's both good for residents, but also good for our business to do so.
So if I could just ask for clarification, so you had in your projections 34 of the permanent employees, direct permanent employees being expected to be Hudson residents. So you're recommending that your recapture number be set at 17 Hudson residents as an employment criteria?
Victoria.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Oh, I don't think that's not how I interpret it.
I'm just trying to understand what you are proposing.
What
Not
page is
trying
this
to
on?
set a requirement, I'm just trying to understand what you're proposing.
I'm proposing that we set the clawback in line with the previous approval, the successful approval, which I think was around 50%, and I'm not using the exact numbers here because I got lost in them too, but I think it was around, the threshold was about 50% of the direct hires would be city residents.
Okay, so, and are you looking, so let's start with the direct hire number then. Are you suggesting is the direct hire number 65 or is it something different than that?
No, it's, if you look at the financial analysis on page 3, that shows the economic impact across Columbia County as a whole. Then on page 4 is, assuming I'm interpreting this correctly, page 4 is the actual impact in the city of Hudson. So if you look at total direct jobs in Columbia County, they're saying 106, of which 42 would be sourced from the city of Hudson.
I mean, could it say something more specific along the lines of be sourced from workforce development efforts that you're involved in within the city of Hudson?
So, Madam Chair, there's a different criteria that we talk about in terms of training opportunities and that sort of thing. So I think we should focus on, there is a criteria that we end up incorporating in the standard project agreement, which requires recapture if certain goals are not met. So that's the goal I'm just trying to identify right now as being what's being proposed. And there's usually 2 numbers there. One is the total number of jobs created, by this particular employer at this particular site. And the second number is of those jobs, how many of those are to be Hudson residents. Okay.
So that was
So
the
those are the
breakdown
numbers
from
I'm
the
looking
county
for.
and
Okay.
Hudson, right?
It would be wherever, wherever the employee lives, right? The job is here, so that has a positive impact on the city to an extent. Then some of those jobs are filled by Hudson residents, which is a further economic impact, right? So those are the
And Madam
numbers.
Chair, if I may, just comparing on page 3, so that the operations that we are responsible for are on-site operations and then hotel. So if you take direct on-site operations and direct hotel operations, that total for Columbia County is 65 jobs. And then if you turn to page 4, within the city of Hudson, what is anticipated, those same 2 lines, 2 direct for on-site operations, and then 32 for direct hotel operations. So together that would be 34 direct within the city of Hudson. And so that is what I'm suggesting we set the metric at. Because those are ones that we can, quantify, right? They're direct and they're the operations that we are in control of. So 34 out of 65.
34 total?
34 total.
Direct.
In the city of Hudson residents. And then that is, if you look at in a whole, then, the comparison for that is 65 tops to the count. So 34 or 65.
Okay, we can maybe go on to the next one and we'll seek some clarification on that.
Okay.
Before we develop the resolution. So the next,
Are we still going through the criteria?
Right.
Mike?
Could you read the next criteria for me, Christine?
that's estimated value of tax exemptions. Which
Right,
again,
in your packets, board members, and on the screen and on our website is the project benefit cost analysis by state, region, county, city, and school district. If you look at the last to the bottom, right above regional benefits to costs, you'll see the total cost of financial assistance includes 800,000 of sales tax revenue. You'll see that the city of Hudson sales tax revenue is 8% of $10 million of construction costs. 400,000 of that would be lost by, or would be an incentive from the state. $348,000 is a county. The cost of the incentive is the county, and because the city receives 13% of 13% of the county's 50% of the sales tax, the cost to the city is $52,000. The second requested financial assistance is foregone real property revenue from the mortgage recording tax. I'm sorry, it's the foregone property tax revenue on a present value basis. That is the pilot agreement, and it's stated at $441,593. 87,000 of that is the county, 127 is the city, and 226 is the school district. Now, the third piece is the mortgage recording transfer tax. The 1.25% on the anticipated financed amount. They've indicated requesting 112,500. That is split 50-50 between the county and the municipality or the city in this case. So of the total 1.354 million, the amount that the city is being asked for in terms of the cost of the incentive is 235,000. The school district is 226,000. The county is 491, and the state is 400,000 for the sales tax. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions? Are there any
As
questions
part
for
of-
anyone online? I can't see. There are.
Now, on the flip side of this, what are the benefits? And the benefits are 10 years of 4% occupancy tax resulting from room revenues, sales tax on hotel, food and beverage, and wellness center expenses, 10-year sales tax on employee spending, those who live in the city, 10% on sales tax from visitors, as well as sales tax from the employees spending on retail, office, and leaseholds, and tax revenues that would be received because the project was built, versus the fact that with no with no project over a 10-year basis, the total estimated tax on this property for 10 years would be $262,000, where under the pilot, it's approximately $1 million. So when you look at the cost benefit, and you take the benefits that the municipal entities are receiving and divide it by the cost of the incentives, you can see that the total project provides 4 times the cost of the benefits in total. Of that, 5 times 5.51 to the county, 8.52 ratio to the city, and 3.25 to the school district. School district is entirely the result of increased tax revenue from the project being built with the pilot payments versus nothing being built there at all, like has existed for the last 30 years. Any questions on the extent of the benefits requested?
Not over here. Does anyone online have any questions? If you do,
No question.
just state your name. Sounds like somebody, right? You can continue, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you can see, the benefit to the city here is the result of the increased real property tax revenue and the sales tax and the 4% hotel occupancy tax, so that their percentage is 8 times where the city and the school district or the county and the school district are lower. Council, what is the next criteria?
The amount of private sector investment.
Sean, if you would address that, a total project cost minus the extent of investment that you intend to mortgage, although both the total project cost reflects the private investment, but you are putting in equity and you are borrowing debt.
The estimated equity is $5.6 million, and the total project cost is just over $25 million.
So that certainly demonstrates or documents the level of private investment. Next category, please.
Next category is the likelihood of the project being accomplished in a timely manner.
Sean, could you address that as the developer?
Sure. We received our planning board approval, I think 3 weeks ago, and we are continuing to move at a good pace, securing our financing for the construction with our historic tax credits. Our part 1 has been accepted, and our part 2 is in preparation for SHPO and NPS. And we have retained contractors for pre-construction services to help us create our full project budget and estimating tools. And as soon as we're able to hopefully come to an agreement with the IDA and the board, then we'll be prepared to break ground at the end of Q1 of next year, with a target completion date in Q2 of 2024.
Any questions?
So, Madam Chair, we usually in the project agreement have a time period for completion of the project. It's usually 36 months from the date of execution of the agreements. That can depend in part on the nature of the particular project. So something you should discuss with this particular project, whether that's reasonable.
Is that reasonable?
That is reasonable.
Okay.
Any discussion? Okay.
Okay.
What's next on the criteria?
The next one is the extent of new revenue provided to local taxing jurisdictions. And I think, Michael, you addressed that
Right.
as part of number 3.
In the aggregate, again, based on the current assessed value of the property as a vacant building, over a 10-year period, the estimated taxes are $262,000. Under the proposed pilot, they're $1,117,000. So it's a
So number 6 is any additional public benefits.
Are there any additional public benefits?
I think the developer should address that, and then for you to evaluate rather than me to make my own assumptions.
Sure. And in our presentation, which I think is online and on file with the IDA, we outline, I believe there's 8 what we see as community or public benefits from the project, which are more maybe qualitative rather than quantitative. Just to review a few of those, I don't want to take too much time, but I think some of the big ones that we're very excited about offering are public access during daylight hours to the entire courtyard. It's about a ½ acre of green space that we intend to landscape very nicely, create sitting areas, walking areas that will be open to the public to use for passive recreation. So that means sitting, eating, walking around, hanging out. I think that'll be a beautiful amenity for that part of town. Some of the other more qualitative benefits are obviously the full revitalization of an entire block of Hudson. So the building, occupies between Prospect and Washington all of 6th Street. And it's sat in disrepair for 30, 40 years. So just as part of the urban fabric to improve visually and how it feels to walk down that block, to have new sidewalks and trees and lights on in a beautiful big historic building. I think there's true benefits to that. Preservation of an important historic nationally landmark asset, I think, is a benefit to residents, to the city, to our country. And I think beyond that, a lot of the spaces that there's spaces that we as the developer will owner, operate, and control around the hospitality business. But then we've also about half of the building will be tenanted spaces. Tenanted spaces will include new opportunities for retail at what we're anticipating is rates that will be below market on Warren Street, so more affordable retail spaces than currently exist. The IDA agreement will help us be able to keep those rents reasonable because we'll have security in what our 10-year forecast looks like. In addition to that, some of the other tenanted spaces, our goal is to have creative and art tenants, so either like a museum or a gallery or some sort of public space or space that's available for the public to go and enjoy culture and art. Yeah, and then I think maybe the last one I'll highlight is on the ground floor of the building. We have a room called the garden room, which is adjacent to the courtyard. And we've reserved that space to partner with a local non-for-profit organization for educational programming. And the idea is that that would be sort of like a flexible, multi-purpose classroom space that different organizations would be able to coordinate with the occupant who sort of operates and manages that to utilize for lots of programs.
Is that space gonna rotate between different non-profit organizations, or that's specifically just for one that you're talking about?
Our hope and idea is that there'll be one organization that sort of takes the responsibility of running it and maintaining it, but then part of the charter or the agreement between us and that organization will be that it's available for other nonprofits or organizations in Hudson to be able to call and reserve or use that space. And so it'll be sort of flexible and multi-purpose. So it's like if like a organization needed to, I don't know, teach a class, or in actually some of
Throw a
the
birthday party for one of
yeah,
their students.
exactly, or do a fundraiser, stuff like that.
Okay. Any questions from the public or board members that are online? Claire, I didn't forget you. You still have your question? You still want to ask?
No, I fixed it. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
I just had.
Okay, Rebecca Wolf?
So we had received another financial analysis, the external analysis, Mike.
Yes.
Are we going
Can we finish these criterias and then we can address that?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. I thought we were done with this.
No, that's okay. The last one in this section is the extent to which the project will provide local labor construction jobs. Are you able to address that, Sean, based on, or have you not selected your contractor?
Based on the, I'm looking on page 2 of the economic analysis, construction phase, economic impact in Columbia County, the estimated direct are 65 jobs, indirect 6, induced 7 for a total of 79 jobs. Within Hudson, 7 direct, 1 indirect, 1 induced for a total of 9.
And obviously, you don't have as much control over that as the other jobs, because the contractors that you're hiring are attempting to hire people who have throughout the region. The next section of criteria, regional wealth creation. In other words, the percentage of sales and customers from outside the city. I think that'll occur just from a $24 million project, commercial and hospitality, but I think it's hard for any of us to put an exact dollar on that. Located in a highly distressed census tract. Both census tracts that comprise the city of Hudson were designated, were the only 2 census tracts in New York State, or in Columbia County, that were designated by New York State as eligible for, trying to think of the program.
Opportunity zone?
Pardon me? It was the program that if you were going to, investors could apply to participate in.
Opportunity zones, Mike. You're thinking the opportunity zones.
Yes,
program.
yes. So it was the only 2 census tracts in the county that qualified for opportunity zone. Alignment with local planning and development efforts. That was a decision that was approved by the planning board. And certainly from a economic development effort, tourism is our single largest cluster of industry and economic support. Promotes walkable community areas. Certainly a hotel in a urban scape with sidewalks on 3 sides would help promote that type of walkable area from the property over to either to walk there to work or to walk to other areas adjacent in downtown for shopping or dining or other economic activity. Eliminate or reduction of blight. Sean, could you address that, please?
Yeah, I'll just say, the building's sat vacant for 40+ years, and we try to keep things locked up and windows in place pretty tightly, but like the elements and having an abandoned building in an urban context is certainly challenging. And I think once there's occupants who are able to conduct various types of business and visitors and guests, I think it will really transform kind of the nature of having a vacant building with nothing happening in it that is 150 years old and is slowly deteriorating.
Proximity and support of regional tourism attraction and facilities. Certainly from are working at CEDC with the County Tourism Board and the City Tourism Commission or Board. Again, tourism is an integral part of the county's economy, certainly evidenced by Ulster and Columbia counties being amongst the largest or highest in the country to have people have their mail forwarded for their second home, and the level of activity that we've seen when you break out the sales tax activity from tourism and hospitality. Next, official city support. Don't know that there's, other than the planning board, I don't think there's been any official determination by the city. Building or site has historic designation. Sean, I don't believe you're.
We've been accepted onto the National Register as part of the acceptance of our park fund from SHPO.
Okay. So that's
and Michael, could I just ask that you provide a copy of that to Michael for the records of the IDA?
Absolutely.
And finally, provides brownfield remediation. Do you have any environmental remediation issues with the building or the site?
We do not. There's some minor abatement activities which we will, get permits for and take care of in Q1, but we are not in a brownfield at all.
Madam Chairman, those are the relevant.
Is that it? Is that the last part of the
Yes.
criteria? Okay, could
Yes.
you please answer Rebecca Wolf's
right
question, comment?
Rebecca, as you know, the New York State statute requires that the IDA undertake a economic and fiscal analysis. That was the report by Camoin and in partnership with Store Associates, which we reviewed earlier. With respect to both the 620 Union Street project and the Depot District project, the agency asked to have us engage a firm to look at the budget, the pro forma, and the method of financing to make an evaluation as to whether or not the requested pilot was within a reasonable range of economic variables for projects of the type that they were reviewing. And we had, on behalf of the IDA, CEDC retained MBR Associates, and Michael Donolo is here to walk through that report briefly. That report is online, and I will pull it up momentarily. Michael?
Thank you. Micah laid it out very well. Our role in this analysis is to verify the reasonableness of the ask, which means to say, is it necessary and is it sufficient to be able to induce the deal and not too generous with respect to the abatement amounts? So as laid out in the report, we examined the financials of the project. We were provided confidential information from the developer in spreadsheet format. We went through two different pro forma financial statements, sets of statements, I should say. One was for the hospitality entity that will run the hotel, the spa, and associated food and beverage units. And the second pro forma financial analysis we looked at was the holding company. The holding company is the company that is going to own the building and undertake the vast share of the renovations of the building, and then collect rent from the hospitality entity and any future tenants of the project. So there's really two questions that we asked. We said, is this assistance necessary for bank financing? And that is measured by the debt service coverage ratio. And the second question is the return that this pilot exemption would allow the developer reasonable? which means to say, is their return on investment in the range that it should be and not higher than that amount? So I'm pleased to say that after we did our analysis and made certain adjustments, we ran that return on investment. The return on investment is actually at the very lowest end of the market clearing average investments. And the debt service coverage ratio is sufficient for bank financing. So our overall finding was that for both the holding company and the hospitality company as a whole, across both organizations, that this pilot abatement is reasonable and not excessive specifically. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has them, and go into more detail if you like.
Rebecca Wolf has a question.
Thank you. A couple of questions. One, I'm just curious, like in a more general sense, when you say that you look to see whether what is the metric or thing that you hold profit up against to see if it's reasonable?
Sure, absolutely. So, and that's I'm happy to go into this detail. So there are data sources that we can get that measure today's market rates of return for developers. So Mike, if you scroll to the very last page, the next page here, you can see right in our conclusion there that we looked at realtyrates.com, the fourth quarter of 2021. So the most recent data, they have an investor survey and the quote unquote equity dividend rate, right? That's the rate of return to the equity holders, the owners of the project, right? So for hospitality projects in fourth quarter of 2021, and specifically full service lodging facilities, the rate of return ranged from as low as 7.83 to as high as 18.11 with an average of about 12%. When we went through and did our estimation of the internal rate of return, that's what the IRR is there, internal rate of return, it was at the very low end of that range. So we are comparing these project financials return to the owners of this project against the market data for full service hospitality projects.
Okay, thanks. And then I had just a smaller questions on the revenue assumptions. The findings were, so in the retail revenue assumptions, it says the developer's assumption for the projected rents for the retail space are well above the current market prices. Does that mean the current market in Hudson or what current market?
Sure. So we, in order to get the best data out there, we actually created a custom geography. There is a map that shows the custom geography. I'm looking for on page 6, right there. It's a little hard to read on the screen, but it goes from about Coxsackie down to roughly Kingston on either side of 87. So that corridor in there, you can see all the data points. Those data points are all hospitality related facilities, but we did the same thing for retail and the same thing for office. So we are looking specifically within that corridor and we're saying, what are the retail rents that are being achieved, right? So this, of course, is retail rents are what the developer is going to receive from retail tenants. So we said when we looked at the data that the retail rates that the developer is anticipating are actually above market averages. So if I were to run the financial analysis at the market average, it would actually bring the investor's revenue down and therefore their internal rate of return. So we did not make an adjustment because we felt that that was, if anything, optimistic.
But you also said that part of the issue was that, you know, rental of similar space in Coxsackie or Wyndham are is different than Warren, 2 blocks off Warren Street. So.
That's correct, right? That's right.
Like I missed them. Yes, Rebecca, excuse me, Heather has trying to say your last name at the same time. Heather Campbell has a question.
Just curious, after you seeing this financial review, I'm wondering, are you still comfortable with your revenue projections?
We are, I think, because of the unique nature of the building and the unique nature of Hudson. Definitely appreciate the regional approach, but I think we are already very invested and really believe in the future of Hudson and our ability to perform within this.
So what did I miss? The projection showed that the income would be lower than projected.
Basically that the review said that based on a regional analysis, the estimates for revenues for hotel room rates and for rental rates might be a little aggressively high, but everyone seems to agree that Hudson is probably not, it's on the high end probably of that regional area, so they're not overly concerned about that. And if they did not make their revenue numbers, the impact that it would have is that their profitability would actually be less.
Yeah.
And they're already at basically a low end in terms of what other businesses like that are averaging.
But not here, just in the region.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, the other point I think is that, Michael, are those data points that you used, did you inflate them for the passage of time before this facility opens?
I did not. I used current rates. I compared them against current rates. I think the key takeaway, as was just mentioned, I don't know who said it, but the key takeaway is that I'm not concerned that the amounts in the pro forma that I looked at were artificially understated, right? I think they're reasonable revenue projections, and that is how we determine the basis for the reasonableness of the IRR. So I think we're in a good spot there.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from anyone online? And if so, please state your name. Is there anything else in this?
The only other thing I wanted to, Madam Chair, ask about is that, Michael, in some of the prior projects, there was some discussion about some certainly referrals for local hiring through Questar and the local workforce board, and some potential job training opportunities. So did you want to discuss that and make that a part of the agreement?
Would those be the only two places that you would seek employment for the
I think,
people?
Madam Chair, I think what Chris is referring to is the workforce development plan that Pocketbook Hudson included in some of their presentation to the agency over the last 2 or 3 months. And I think that we want to have the agency review that, make sure that full understanding between the agency and the developer, and then incorporate that agreement into the IDA documents if the agency goes forward, so that the developer is obligated to do it or risks some level of recapture.
Absolutely, but I want to know, are those the only two places that they will try to gain from the employment?
No, I think it's a pretty robust workforce development.
Yeah, it would include BOCES and Questar would be two of the sort of like feeder pools that we would go to for collaboration for workforce, but I think we would go far beyond that. We've had discussion about collaborating with the IDA's own program as that's developed,
And also
which we're happy to do.
Collaborate with the nonprofit organizations who have hands-on to families and people that need and are willing to work, who may not even have access to go out to Questar, but they can walk back and forth here.
Absolutely.
My suggestion.
Yeah, I think we would be open to, in the spirit of,
And Questar and BOCES are great, but not everyone has a car, not everyone has their information with them, so I don't want to, and it's technically outside of Hudson, so let's keep it within Hudson.
We're comfortable with a condition that includes those organizations and other ones within Hudson, because our view is that the more collaborators or places that we can go to, find folks who are interested in training and working within our
Absolutely.
business that are local is better. So
Absolutely.
we're not.
Madam Chair, as you know from your own work in the community, there is and the work I know Rebecca has also been involved in these activities, that there's really a groundswell to begin to develop a training program that isn't the responsibility of any one project, but is a collaborative effort that will address the full continuum of employment need, from those who have not had opportunity to get into the job market to those who want to continue to grow and expand their careers.
Yes, and we do have that experience. Myself and Rebecca will be willing to work with Sean, especially since this is our last month.
Don't brag.
You lied, girl, you lied, man.
And from our perspective,
Is that all that
from
we're
our
going for?
I think
So
so.
we can't do the same thing, Mike. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I can't see you. I take the screen down and I can watch you.
What do you have to say, Mike?
Just that, as we continue to focus on these issues and we aggregate the obligations that each of the project developers are willing to commit to, that it's all about providing a quality place to live and a decent job. So, I think that's what the goal of the agency is, and that's as we look at some of the opportunities to tighten down on some of these things going forward, that it's all what we're trying to accomplish.
I have a question. I guess this would go towards Mike and our attorney. I was having discussions with some board members and community members, and we wanted to know if it's possible to create a committee along with the IDA to monitor these projects that the IDA passed, just to make sure that everything is going along the process as what they agreed upon and what was all in all agreed upon within the community, and just having, I forget the right word, but so excuse me for that, but just having a committee that will take the responsibility to make sure that the project is going accordingly.
So that's a really good question, and the board is responsible for doing oversight of its projects. So it should be reviewing, as part of looking at the Paris report that you do every year, you're supposed to be getting reporting from each of your projects. And then you should be looking at those reports to make sure that your partners are meeting the goals that they're required to meet. So that's a board responsibility, which you can have the governance committee perhaps take on. That would perhaps be a good committee to take that role.
Okay.
And look at those reports very carefully. I mean, you're all looking at them, but maybe to have a committee meeting to sit down and
Specifically.
actually review those against the metrics that were established.
And not
in the
just
types
review it, we
of-
wanted to go a step further, like taking those trips to the facility,
To
so to
visit,
speak,
sure.
to visit, make sure
Right.
everything is,
What you expected, right?
things of that nature, things that may not even be
Sure.
in the report, but we see that needs to be attended to.
Well, the idea.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was gonna say, the IDA has agreements, right? So you would be looking at the metrics in the agreements to see what the IDA is required, right? And then whether they met those or whether they didn't meet those, then you have a process. If they didn't meet them, you have a process to consider what to do about that, right? In your policies, you have a process for dealing with that. Okay.
I don't know on the top of my head who is actually in the governance committee, but you all know who you are. So please think about what we are discussing so we can enhance your duties as the governance committee members.
Madam Chair, not to address this project because is still before you, but if the other two projects that the agency has approved, the Depot project and the 620 Union Street project go ahead, the agency is going to have about $450,000 as opposed to the 20 or 30 it has today. And I think those resources too can be used to not only ensure compliance, but to look at more creative ways within state law's use of IDA assets and dollars.
And we can also look at that as well, board members and non-board members, to suggest 2 board members to see how we can use those financial benefits to enhance what we have in the city according to our bylaws.
And within the scope, of course, of
And
what the
within-
IDA is
Within
permitted
the
to do
scope
with its
of the
funds.
IDA.
Because the IDA can't make grants, for example.
The IDA
Only
cannot
other
make
projects.
grants, for example.
No pizza parties.
Human microphone.
Yeah, such a party pooper.
But we do have to respect the rules and abide by them. So if we can all just go over that, it's particularly the governance committee, and we can move forward. If there aren't any other questions, we have other business on the agenda. Are there any other business to discuss? Okay, are there any other public comments or questions? With that being silent, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
My move.
I'll make that motion.
Heather beat you, and we'll take them all as the second to that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? No. The meeting is now adjourned. Lisa, I got you. It's 2:37.
Thank you.
Right, I think this is one of the longest meetings.
It's like you're not